want to say thank you first and foremost for, for joining us. I know I kind of caught you last minute yesterday, and I appreciate you doing this.
No problem. I'm just learning how all this stuff works, so no, it's an equal benefit.
Perfect. Glad we can help you out then. So last week we got the chance to talk with Alan Webb, and you have a couple connections with Alan. One, you both are high school record holders in your nation, in the mile, and two, that you guys both went to Michigan. So I guess I'll start there with coming out of New Zealand as a pretty heralded athlete. What got you to choose Michigan? It was not quite the power program at the time yet. So what got you there?
Well, it was before the internet really got taking off. At Michigan was getting all of the hype because of Alan Webb. I think Ron Warhurst, the coach there, was having a weekly press conference because there was so much demand for his attention, and he had been on Letterman's show, as he probably told all you guys. So Alan was a hero to me, and I had a couple of emails with him in high school, and anytime he sent me an email, I was like fanboying up big time, like, wow, I got an email from Alan Webb. And in high school, every morning I'd get up early and check the results of what had happened in the States to see what Alan Webb or Ryan Hall or Dathan Ritzenhein or the Canadian guy Nate Brannon had done around America. And that was my motivation to get out and train each day, because you guys are 6 to 8 hours ahead of us in New Zealand. And those guys were 1 year ahead in terms of, we were the same year in high school, but they went straight after the summer into their freshman year, whereas I took off a year after high school. We finished high school in December, so rather than starting, I had to wait through until August the following year to go. But I ended up deciding to wait another year, so I went a year and a half after high school, and so I just followed all their results. And two of those guys, Nate and Alan, went to Michigan. So yeah, I was like, sign me up. I'd love to be a part of that. That was before Oregon was even a known school. They weren't a very good program at the time. It was sort of Stanford and Michigan were the two programs, and Vinland Anand didn't recruit foreigners, so that wasn't an option. He was at Stanford at the time.
Yeah. So what was it like kind of going to a program that kind of had that buzz and energy about it, and what you could contribute to it?
Yeah, well, Alan Webb's freshman year at Michigan, I don't know, he told you guys, but he basically tried to set every record there was in training. There's a lot of sort of famous workouts. You guys probably have that workouts that are specific to your town or university. They're not necessarily measured distances, but like a famous hill or a certain loop. And he wanted to sort of put his name on the top of the totem pole, and he was fit enough to do that as a freshman, but me and all the other guys were just hanging on for dear life, and every workout became like a race, so they were all burnt out. And after Alan decided to leave Michigan after his freshman year and turn professional, the rest of the team was like, oh, what a relief. We can just chill out now and enjoy it. And I didn't know anything else, so I showed up into town, and they were like, all right, we're not taking this year seriously, we're just going to have fun. So that was probably a big benefit to me, because I'd only really come in from running 30 or 40 miles a week in high school. And so every workout, there were probably 12 of us running every rep together, crossing the line. We were talking the whole way through. We weren't really ever busting it, but we were just taking it easy. And that was a really good way to transition my freshman year and get used to the group training. I'd never really had groups to train with before. My high school, we had 2,000 kids, but only 2 of us ran track. So yeah, it was a lot of fun and a pretty laid back freshman year. And we ended up doing pretty well, even without ever pushing it hard in training. We just got that daily consistency and just had a whole heap of fun. Yeah.
What was one of your favorite workouts while at Michigan?
I just liked getting off the track. Anytime we have to do longer than 400 meters, I much prefer to do longer reps on trails where you're not having to count how many laps you got to go around. And 800s are so hard on the track. That's probably my worst thing to ever do. So 600s, 800s, or Ks or anything like that, I'd much rather be on an uneven trail where you're just focused on not twisting an ankle on a tree root and you forget about the finish line. It sort of passes time a little easier. So we have an arboretum in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where the University of Michigan is, and a lot of our workouts will be down there. And fortunately, I've never broken an ankle. A few other guys have, but I spend most of my time down there, and it's a good way to sort of take your mind off of the pain of the finish line.
Okay. So from your time at as a high school, record setter, and then time at Michigan, and then 2-time medalist in the Olympics, right?
Yep.
What which one kind of stands out to you the most?
I was saying this the other day when I was speaking with a high school team. Honestly, like when I was 7 years old, I did a 200-meter race at our local like city championships, and I was as focused and like the intensity of that moment, and I can visualize that whole race, how that went, and the satisfaction of reaching the time goal that I was aiming for. And then again, when I was in high school and my first ever race running overseas at I ran in Australia, and I managed to somehow run like a 6-second PR, and I won the race in the 800 meters. Like no matter where I have been in my life, like the intensity or the moment was just as large, whether I was 7 or when I was 25 winning an Olympic medal. It's all relative to your own goal for that time. Like everyone has the opportunity to set that goal at the beginning of the season and work towards it. And when you finally achieve it, like the intensity and the satisfaction and the occasion of that moment can be just as big no matter where you're at in your own career. And I was no more nervous in an Olympic final as I was in any of those younger races. My first ever cross-country race for Michigan might have been my most nervous. I had no idea how I'd fare against lining up with 300 other people in a race, So you guys all have that same opportunity to experience the intensity and the reward of focusing and hopefully achieving the goal.
Awesome. I'm gonna see if anybody on the team has a question they want to throw out right now.
I got a comment. I'm right now at one of 2 of my town's hills that we have that one workout on.
Nice. Are you about to go do it, or you just went for a drive?
I'm gonna do a different one right now. I'm at the base of one of my go-to runs.
That's nice. In New Zealand, we're not allowed to drive to go work out at the moment. Your only exercise you're allowed to do is out of your front door. So that's a nice luxury you have at the moment, to be able to drive for your exercise. Mix it up a little bit.
I'm from the middle of nowhere, so I'm pretty lucky.
Jack's socially distanced himself with where he lives, so
yeah, I figured if there was ever going to be any sort of dead time or people trying to figure out what questions to ask, although I ran at Michigan for 3 years, I turned professional after my junior year. I hung around the program for another decade, and I still sort of observe in and out what's going on. And sort of the biggest thing that I notice is it's not if, but when someone gets an injury, is how people go through that experience where you sort of feel isolated from your team experience. You're not part of the workouts and you're off doing your own thing, whether it be in the pool or on the spinning bikes or whatever. And so I just really encourage people to, those who have a plan in place before that happens, they're able to sort of cope with it a little bit better. Otherwise it can sort of, it's just as much of an emotional thing as a physical thing. And from my perspective, I always encourage people to take sort of, there's a multi-step approach, is that first it's good to grieve. It's okay to grieve and be frustrated, especially if you have a stress fracture or a sort of a long-term injury that you're going to have to take a couple of months off. It's good to take that week off and like really let out all your frustrations and cry or yell or like be really angry about it, but also don't let that frustration go into like go and pound the cross training straight away. Your body needs to fully recharge to sort of start that healing process. So I've always been a big proponent of take a good 10 days, 2 weeks to just totally sloth out. The dream would be to be on an island in Fiji or the Caribbean, right? And just forget about the sport for a while and eat as much as you want and let your body really start the healing process. And then set out a goal, not for your running, but for your rehab time. Like, what are ways that I can really like crush this rehab to really make my body stronger and more efficient and fix all of the imbalances, and really set a plan for that. And once you have that plan in place, then once you see the light at the end of the tunnel, whether it be in 3 or 5 or 6 weeks time, when you're allowed to start thinking about proper full body training, and then you can start your cross training regimen. But a lot of the time people rush into the cross training right away because they need a substitute. Well, I'm not allowed to run today, so I need to do that to still feel like I have my routine down or my sense of significance. But I think that should be the last step in the puzzle. It's an important step, but it's not the first step that you should take. And sometimes it can be detrimental long term, and it might keep you away from getting back into the stuff that really makes you fit, as the actual running. So that sort of stuff that I've observed over the years as people have sort of navigated that gauntlet. And I've had 5 surgeries myself and about 6 stress fractures. I've experienced a lot of good things in my career, but when you've been running professionally and at a high level for 20 years, you have a lot of time to experience all of that crappy time in running as well. It's a little bit of an inevitability when you're on that knife edge of trying to be the best you can be, but that also means there's lots of opportunities to getting some injuries as well.
Besides some of those injury times, that are forced upon us, for frustrations, do you ever have those times where, over the course of your career, you were just frustrated with running or not wanting to get out the door, or, in the middle of a training cycle, but wanted, do I have to do this, today, or do you kind of give yourself that mental break the same way you just described with making the transition from training to cross training to, even if you're healthy? Have you ever kind of given yourself that time?
Yeah, lots of times, and especially the last 3 or 4 years has been probably the hardest time for me from that perspective, because I think regardless of how I perform against others, my competitors, I'm not always winning races. I'm always against people that are better than me. There's people who are doping in the sport. There's lots of that sort of distraction. But the thing that's always kept me motivated is that lure of running my PR, improving my time, and like getting that high. It's really addictive. But I haven't run any PRs in the last 2 or 3 years because I'm about to turn 37 in a couple of weeks. Like, you can't keep PRing forever. So I've been having to try and rediscover other motivators outside of performance of why I want to keep on running. And that's been sort of an ebb and flow. But when it really comes down to it, is what do I most enjoy about running aside from the performance side of it? And I realized as I've sort of tried to figure this out, there's 2 parts to it. Is I love going out and discovering new places to run. Like, I like the exploratory nature of running, especially out in the trails, discovering new loops or ways to get out into nature. And secondly, I love running with a buddy. I love the opportunity to run with one other guy and just chat about life. It's sort of an escape from a lot of other stuff. Sure, it's fun running in big groups, but I really enjoy running one-on-one, so you can sort of get sort of on a bit more of a deeper level in the conversation, just like if you're out on the golf course with someone as well. But running is a really good outlet for me personally to engage on a deeper level in conversation. Sometimes us guys sort of can be a little bit on the surface with our conversations, but running is an avenue to do that. And so if I use those as my motivator, get out the door, and I do that on a consistent basis when I'm struggling for motivation, then suddenly after a couple of weeks of that, it's like, oh, maybe I am ready to start getting back and doing workouts again. And so I've always taken a week off after each season, whether it be the indoor, cross country, or outdoor seasons, just to recharge mentally. And then getting back into it is using those sort of 2 things I talked about. okay, let's go and explore a new trail, or let's go, I need to catch up with this guy I haven't seen for a while. Running would be a good way for us to, since I don't drink alcohol or caffeine, I can't go to the bar or to the coffee shop. So running is my outlet for doing that. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to ask the team again if anybody has a question. Feel free to jump in with it.
Question.
Yeah.
If you could be really good at a different track event, like a sprint or a jump or a throw, which one would it be?
I loved the 200 meters when I was a kid, and I loved high jump. They were my two favorite events. I did track ever since I was like 5 years old, so we used to do every single event. I didn't train until I was about 16, but we'd do club nights on a Wednesday and race on a Saturday, and so you'd do every possible discipline there was, and they were always my two favorite events. There's something about the 200 when you slingshot off the bend into the straightaway. It's like the finishing kick of a distance race, right? But it's just that intensity. I really enjoyed having the stagger of people out in different lanes, and if you ran in lane 2 or lane 3, you could try and make up that stagger on the bend and then battle down the straightaway. And high jump was just that, like, there's like this drama that unfolds where you get 3 attempts, but then they get refreshed if you make to the next height, and then you can pass and do all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, those would be my two other options if I could have. But I'm not a sprinter. I'm not a jumper anymore. So middle distance has been sort of the area that has kept going. What's your main event that you do?
Distance. I was focusing on the 5K during track.
So cross and track and a little bit of middle distance as well to mix it up.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Etta, you got your great question for him today?
Hi, sorry. Yeah, okay. It's not sports related, but what is your favorite way to consume potatoes and why?
I'm a big potatoes au gratin guy. Having it thinly sliced with layers of cheese and like a creamy sauce, like that's the best way. So yeah, I love potatoes done thinly is best. However that is done, whether it be done as a hash or an au gratin style. But yeah, I'm a big fan of au gratin. We do a layer of au gratin, and we put some pork chops in and chuck it in the oven, and then some green beans on the side. That's been our go-to the last couple of weeks in our family. How about you?
That's an excellent question. I have previously said tater tots.
Good choice.
My phone.
Yeah, wait. Jen has a really good potato dish, though.
Okay. So, what it is it's mashed potatoes, right? And then you take potato soup, and then you pour it on as a gravy, and then you take potato chips, and then you crush those up and sprinkle it on top. That's the ultimate way to eat potatoes.
Like
as brought to by our college cafeteria.
The potato triple crown.
Yes, it's pretty good in my opinion. And that's that on that.
Anybody?
So how are you guys all staying? How are you coping with the not being your season being cancelled and the uncertainty about the summer and whether fall will happen and all that sort of stuff? Is it harder to stay motivated because you don't have the schedule in front, or are you able to enjoy just the simplicity of running outside of the pressures of competition? Or don't be shy.
I think it's, for me at least, I think it's been a little strange. I mean, in my entire county, there's 2 of us on a collegiate athletic roster at all. He's also a distance runner, but he's about an hour and a half from me, so we don't really run together. But I don't know, it's hard to go back to running by yourself again after running at school, but it's working out.
Yeah. You got to discover your enjoyment of running from a different element.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't get the luxury of running with people because I'm a dad of 2 kids. So you run when you can.
Yeah. Yeah.
Probably harder for women who don't often have the option of running on your own from a safety standpoint, or at least my wife will be more selective of the routes she gets to choose when she's running on her own versus if she's in a group, just for safety.
So, what was your experience growing up in New Zealand with some of the rich history of running there? You know, I know you mentioned you looked up to Alan Webb, you know, kind of as a contemporary, but who were some of your running idols, you know, as far as historical figures, and, you know, especially in the New Zealand area?
Yeah, well, as I was saying earlier, the internet for running only really started taking hold after I finished high school. I didn't get an email address until my senior year of high school. Year 2000 was my senior year in high school, so we didn't have all of the avenues that you guys have for being a fan of the sport. But I would go, when I finally caught the running bug, which was sort of the start of my senior year of high school, I had to get as much information as I possibly could, and the only outlet really was to go down to the local public library, and I read every possible running book there was there. There's only about 12 of them, but most of them were autobiographies of New Zealand's past Olympic medalists from the black and white days, the 60s and the 50s and 30s as well. So we had Jack Lovelock, who won the gold medal in 1936, Peter Snell in 1960 and 1964, and then John Walker in 1976. So New Zealand's had 3 guys who have been world record holders and gold medalists in my distance, the 1500 meters. So it was just, I love reading stories of people's lives. I'm not really interested once they get good. It's really fascinating reading about what their child life was like, what their experience before they discovered their sport and all that sort of stuff. Even now, I listen to the skateboarding podcast about all these guys who are the professional skateboarders, but I don't care about once they become really good. It's really fascinating how they discovered the sport and when it suddenly blossomed for them. So it's the same for I've always been a big fan of autobiographies or podcasts about people's life stories. And so that's what really clicked with me, was that they're no different than me from their upbringing. Now it's just a matter of, can I have that same mentality as they had once they stepped out of their little bubble, of their little pond? Could they start beating people in the next bigger area that they went to? And fortunately for me, it went from going from my town to my city to racing against Australians, and then finally making it to America. And I remember I got to the States, and some of my teammates in that summer before my freshman year, they said, "What is your goal for cross country?" And I said, "I just hope to make the travel squad so I can get to go on some meets and get per diem, you know." And they just shook their head and they said, "You have no idea," because I really didn't think I could run 8 kilometers or 10 kilometers and make the top 7. But as these guys guessed, like once I did the training that they did, I was able to, I think I ended up finishing 28th my freshman year at NCAA Cross. So I was not only able to make the travel squad, but each week I think I improved 15 or 20 seconds per race. And that was quite a fascinating journey.
Yeah, I have one more question that I want to ask, kind of, I guess, personally as a fan of the sport. Here in Oregon, Bowerman's a pretty towering figure for us, and he's got some pretty close ties with Lydiard, and they always talked about the connection between Bowerman and Lydiard, and him bringing the jogging craze back to Oregon, and then, you know, the 4x-mile showdown between the two. Is Bowerman's name similarly mythical over there as Lydiard's is over here?
No, not many people really know. Maybe like in the hardcore running fans, they know of him, but probably more so because of the Prefontaine Classic or because of Nike. I mean, yeah, I had never heard of him before I came to the States, but most people have been. Now that the world is all on the internet now. It's sort of less, but back in the day it wasn't so much. But I think the main benefit that most of us received from the Lydiard mindset in my era wasn't the running 100 miles a week and just running tons and tons, but the culture in New Zealand was that you always met up on a Sunday for a long run, and we'd have 40 or 50 people together. Although most of us trained on our own during the week, the whole city would get together, all of the serious runners, for the weekend long run. So that's where we did have the group mentality, and we'd always run 20 miles. Even when I was only running 40 miles a week, I was still running like 16 or 17 miles for my long run. And that's something I've always instilled, and I think it's what's kept me going for a long time, is the long run being the staple of training and not really worrying about workouts or anything like that. But just so long as you get your long run in each week, it takes care of most of the other stuff. The other stuff is sort of gravy after that. It's the main base layer of your potatoes.
Does anybody else have a question for Nick before we let him go? All right, we asked Alan this kind of at the end, but what was your like hardest workout? He turned it into his most memorable workout, but which workout, kind of stands out to you as being the hardest one you've done, or
the best workout performance wise, or the one that I struggled the most on?
Whichever one you'd like to go with.
Yeah, I hate doing 800 meter reps. I remember once we were down in a training camp in Tallahassee, and I was supposed to do a 3-mile tempo run and then 6 by 800 meters, but there was a 5K fun run being put on by a sorority at FSU. So he said, why don't we go run that first, and then we'll go do the tempo. And I had no idea how hilly the course was going to be. So I did a 5K race, and a couple of guys, frat boys, took off hard at the start. So I went with them, and I was in so much pain. And then it was a charity run. So all of the sorority girls are holding up signs, run for the boobies, run for the boobies. It was like a breast cancer awareness race. And so I had to keep going, and I was totally pooped afterwards. So it wasn't really a tempo. It was sort of like an all-out effort for a 5K over the hilly Tallahassee. And then I had to do 800s on the track. And for some reason, I'd get through 300 meters of each rep. And the last 100 meters of the lap, you felt like you were coming into the finish line. But then you still got a whole nother lap to go. And that's why I hate doing 800s on the track. And yeah, I just wanted, after each one, I said, I'm done. I do like that sign like this. And my wife and my brother were there. They were both my assistant coaches at the time. They're like, no, you're still going. You're still going. And I somehow got through all 6 of them. But I think I started off at 2:10 and I finished at like 2:28 for the last one. Each one got 3 or 4 seconds slower than the last. So that was awful.
Well, last call for question for Nick. All right. Well, I just want
to encourage you guys. Like, it sucks that you're not in competition right now, but this is a good opportunity to develop like the tools for when this might happen in a different situation where you can't run because of injury. So coping mechanisms to cope with like being away from the team or from competition, but also I'm 37 in a couple of weeks' time, and I hope to still be running into my 40s. You guys are super young, your kids, although you might have more facial hair than me, some of you. You got a long, long time in running. So college or your whatever year in college, that's only a small part of hopefully what will be your running experience. Don't just think this is the be all and end all. Sure, it's a great time of your running, but it's not the only time. There's lots of other avenues to enjoy it. So grieve, take process, set goals, but like hopefully you got a whole another 20 years ahead of you running. So think of it as the long game. But when you do that, this is what I've found, when you don't focus on always forcing it to get back for the next thing, when you aim for the long game, your short game results end up being better anyway. Whether it be rehabbing from an injury, don't rush it back because you think you're to get ready for conference meet in 4 or 5 weeks. You'll probably end up being injured again by rushing it back. But if you take the long time, you might end up being healthy for conference anyway. That's sort of the approach I've always taken. Take the long game, and it will help your short game anyway.
Well, thank you so much, Nick. We really appreciate your time.
Hey, thanks guys. Take care.